Hello, I'm Ava, and some of you might assume that I'm very lucky. Like, the luckiest person alive. Why? Well, this is going to shock you, but I won nearly $200 million in the lottery. That's crazy, right? Well, you know what's crazier? The day that I won that money was the worst day of my life. Yes, you heard me right. The worst day of my life. Because the moment that I won that money, my life became unbearable. You see, I used to live in a neighborhood with my mom, my sister, and my stepdad. I can't say things were perfect, but I used to be happy. Everything changed the day I found out my stepdad had been fired from his job. And, soon enough, we started getting last warnings on our bills, and even warning letters from our landlord. On the third rent due notice, we got evicted and kicked out of our own house. I wanted to cry that day, but I tried to stay strong for my family. I told them that I might have just enough money that we could survive on, and that they shouldn't worry. I then took out all the money I saved in my bank account, and realized that it could probably buy us an old trailer that we could live in. And that's exactly what happened. My stepdad thanked me and went off to look for a suitable trailer that we could all fit in. And in a few hours, we were living in a trailer park near an old dump. And just like that, the tuition money that I saved for months for college all disappeared overnight, forcing me to start from square one. It felt horrible, and it seemed like I was never going to get a chance to go to college. I felt tears starting to run down my cheeks, but I didn't want any of my family members to see that I was crying. So I wiped them away quickly. I excused myself and went out of the trailer for a walk. It felt like the more I walked, the more I thought about my problems. There was just no escape from it. As I was wandering the streets, I ran into a gas station nearby. I wanted to get something to drink from the store, and I saw a big sign that said, "A chance to win $200 million. I laughed sarcastically. Yeah, sure, I whispered to myself. Behind me stood an old lady who heard me. She said, "You never know, dear. Life is all about luck. You should get one." I didn't really believe her, but I was desperate. "2 tickets, please," I told the cashier. He handed them over, and I took one card, then gave the other to the old lady as a nice gesture. We left the store together, and she gave me her card and said that she doesn't have a TV and wouldn't be able to know if she won. So, she then gave me her address and said that if she had won anything, I can come over to her house and let her know. As I walked back home, my thoughts went back and forth in my head about what would happen if I actually won any type of money. It was a little fantasy, something to think about, just to ease my mind away from my troubles. When I made it home and opened the door, my sister, mom, and stepdad were all fighting. It looked like they had gotten themselves into another argument about money, but I was too tired to bother getting involved, and I simply went to bed. Days had passed, and I had almost forgotten about the lottery tickets, until one evening, I was reminded to check my numbers when my stepdad had the TV. It was a local news channel that talked about how the lottery money was yet to be claimed. They showed the numbers on the screen, and I pulled out my ticket. I wasn't very surprised that the numbers didn't match, and I crumbled it up, ready to move on, until I remembered the old lady's ticket, and pulled that out as well. When I went over the numbers, then went over them again, I felt like the room started to spin. The numbers matched perfectly. I quickly reached back into my pocket and fished out the paper that the lady wrote her address on. I wanted to rush over and tell her the news, but when I held the paper in my hand, I froze. $200 million. The thought kept running through my head. I looked around the trailer and thought even more about everything we could do with that money. I bought the ticket, and my family was really struggling. I knew that we could use the money more than she could, so I decided not to tell her. I mean, she was an old lady. What would she do with it anyway? Instead, I leaped up from the chair and called my family over. When I told them the news, None of them believed me, but I just smiled. We looked back toward the TV and checked the numbers again. When it was confirmed, we all jumped and shouted with joy. It was an unbelievable feeling. Everyone started talking about what they wanted to do, but one thing we could all agree on was getting out of that trailer. We went and cashed in the ticket. There was a big news conference filled with cameras, and my mom was made up to look her best. Our first purchase was a big house in the best part of town. I shared the money with my mom, sister, and stepdad, and they were quick to splurge. My mom bought clothes from only the most expensive stores and boutiques, while my sister bought herself the car of her dreams. And even my stepdad started spending money on unnecessary things. Don't get me wrong, I didn't mind the initial thrill, but after a while, things started to get out of hand. It seemed like the more money that was spent, the more things everyone wanted. Our once overly big house was being filled with stuff that was paid for, used once, and never touched again. I was happy that everyone was enjoying themselves after struggling so much, but we all started to drift apart. It was like we were at a crossroads, each headed in our own direction, and while everyone else seemed happy to walk off toward their own idea of luxury, I felt miserable. Nothing I seemed to buy made me feel better, and the more I tried to get our family to spend time together, the more they moved apart. Whenever we were in the same room with each other, an argument would break out. In the end, I barely saw any of them anymore. I just wanted to feel the connection that we once had. That's when I got the biggest shock of my life. A couple of months passed, and my biological father showed up to the house. It had been so long that I barely recognized him. He seemed happy to see me and talked about how he missed being a family. He was really over the top and started talking about how he wanted to be in my life again. I was so angry when I saw his face. I remembered the day he walked away from us, leaving me, my sister, and our mom to struggle alone because, and I quote, "I didn't sign up for this. I never even wanted kids." I told him if he didn't want us then, he's not going to be in my life now, and slammed the door on his stunned face. For the rest of the day, I felt an emptiness fill me. It wasn't just from seeing my biological father, but from the money and what it turned everybody into. A once close family wasn't even talking to each other anymore. My sister and I were best friends, but now I only see her when she comes by to pick up her stuff or ask for more money. My stepdad isn't the same hard worker that he used to be either. Now he spends his time wasting away on the couch, isolating himself from everything but the television. And even though my mother was never the kindest or the most caring person, now she's even worse. She doesn't even try to hide the fact that she's only interested in the family for as long as it can benefit her. She spent more money than everyone else, and she's become more spoiled. Sadly, I am not any better. I always thought that I wanted to be better than my mom, but when the money came, I realized that I was similar. I started becoming more materialistic. I began buying things I didn't need, and I started caring about what people think about me. The worst part of all was that I even gave up on my education. When I really thought about it, it made me sick. Finally, it hit me. The money wasn't even mine in the first place. After all this time, I remembered the old lady and how the ticket was hers, how she was the reason that I bought the ticket after all. Feeling that my mind was made up, I decided to find her. I remembered her address and got dressed to go see her. When I made it to her house, it was small and looked a little worn out, but it was also peaceful. I knocked on the door, and there she was. I explained to her what happened with the tickets that I bought and was ready to apologize, but, to my surprise, she told me that she didn't remember. She saw the confusion on my face and politely invited me inside, and there I saw her family. She introduced me to her children. She had 2 sons and a daughter, and they introduced me to their kids. They all welcomed me with a smile, a complete stranger, and they didn't look put off. I explained to them how I met their mom, and they seemed to all realize what happened. She had Alzheimer's, and it was starting to reach the late stages. Her kids came home to help their mom and brought their families so that she could feel comfortable since their father had passed a long time ago. I came to thank her and share the money with her, but without me even offering them any money, they treated me kindly and invited me to dinner. I was hesitant, but I missed having family dinners, so I decided to stay. It was one of the best nights I've had in a very long time. We laughed, shared stories, and played games together. The family didn't have much, but they were happy. It reminded me of what I used to have. So, after the sun started to go down, and I started to leave, I turned and told her and her kids my plan to give them a majority share of the money. I wrote each one of them a check and handed them out. They were shocked, then overjoyed. They all laughed and smiled. I thanked the lady one more time and walked away. On my way home, I called up my family and told them to meet me. By the time I arrived, they were there. I walked in and saw them arguing again. At that point, I didn't want to waste any more time. I calmed them down and jumped straight into what I did. Their reaction went from shocked to screaming to anger, but I didn't back down. I explained that the money was ruining us, how it was like we weren't even a family anymore. There was just enough for each of us to live comfortably, and I understood if they were angry with me. After that, I walked away. It took a couple of days, but eventually, my family seemed to realize the same thing I did. My sister was the first to come around, then my stepdad. My mom, on the other hand, rarely ever spoke to me again. Her and my stepdad got divorced, and she moved into her own place. Though I was disappointed, I kind of figured she would feel that way. After a while, it seemed like I was getting my family back. Everyone had grown accustomed to going their own way, but now we spent more time as a family. I started college like I always wanted, and spent my time studying. I still look back with regret about the day that I won the lottery and how it turned my family against each other, but now I look at the good it was able to do afterward. How I was able to help a family that wasn't my own, how I was able to go back to school, and how I was able to see what really matters: family, not money.